Bill, it is good to see you, and I'm going to start with you here, Bill. So you look at 2023, it looks like, Bill, consumer demand for the EVs, at least in North America, kind of seems to be waning here a bit, Bill. What are the issues, and do you expect that to change in 2024?
Yeah, so first of all, Happy New Year, everybody. I think what we saw in 2023 were some pretty interesting headwinds. I think some of the supplier elements were balanced, so that's good. But I think people, as you just mentioned in your last segment, found, you know what, hey, building vehicles is can be tough, particularly if you're a new company that's starting out with it. I think that many of the early adopters in the light passenger space have already bought or put their money down on a vehicle. And I think what you're going to find is that you get to that next level adopter, they're going to look to things like battery density, eliminate range anxiety, try to find some additional electric vehicle charging stations and network. You know, going from 200, 500 charging stations to 20,000, 500,000 is a whole different matter. So I do think that there's been a little ebb off the hype curve there, and I think that some of the OEMs are starting to reconsider what their portfolio and volumes will be going into 2024.
So, Bill, you mentioned some of these headwinds, and we saw companies like Ford and GM pull back on those EV investments this year after, highly touting them for a year or two before that. What are some of the things that you're seeing from like a headwinds point of view that continue going into 2024? I mean, we're seeing EV sales growing, but they're also sort of not growing fast enough. Is it more of a case of high prices, high rates, things like that?
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, Pras. I mean, you're in the upper segment now for most of the EV offerings. So you mentioned General Motors. General Motors just went through their culling of their Buick dealerships. Half of them won't join the EV journey. So you kind of have to get that square right with your distribution framework. Guess what? We also had a little bit of a labor discussion. Thankfully, it ended up before Halloween. But guess what? That price factor is being built in, and it doesn't matter if you were part of the UAW or the Canadian discussion. You're also being part of the opt-in. So all the people who are not unionized are building in 9, 10, 12% labor costs uplifts. That all has to be pushed down into the suppliers. Suppliers have a lot different elements to build in terms of EV, less mechanical parts, in many cases, very different design elements. So it's really going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out, not just from the consumer side, but from the supplier sourcing side.
From the supplier sourcing or also the OEM side, you'd mentioned before, I think, that there's going to be more, discipline from the OEM side on spending, depending on basically saying that they don't want to spend so much on certain things. They might outsource some things. What are some of those sort of factors that you see the OEMs shifting outward for?
Yeah, well, I think it's the old conversation of going back to core capabilities, right? Obviously AI plays a huge role in this, particularly from our company, SAP. We're very active in the business AI perspective. So what does that look like, right? If I can buddy up with a bot, right? And I can actually team together, robot and human to tackle larger problems, more high data density. What does that look like, right? So in a way, there's some of this light sourcing that can be done with AI, but for sure, talent's going to remain an issue, right? I think we need to get square on an immigration policy at some point. Leaders are doing what they need to do to make that happen, and whether or not that's sourcing across NAFTA or bringing in company employees to do certain amount of work on short periods of time, you're going to see that as well. But as I like to say, for those people building in the South, that kind of car building capability, you can't pull somebody out of fast food and retail and expect them to build cars right away, right? It's a learning process. So we're at the first part of that learning process from an industrialization perspective, and I think we need to keep an eye on that for the next 2, 3, 4 years.
And Bill, I also want to get your take on the market over there in China for EVs, and names like BYD. Bloomberg saying BYD will actually surpass Tesla as the new worldwide leader in EV sales, likely in the current quarter, Bill. How do you see that market in China evolving? I mean, it certainly has the support of the government over there. How does it evolve, Bill? And what does that, by the way, mean for U.S. companies like Tesla?
Yeah, right. So, if you build to market, obviously China is one of the largest markets in the world. Interesting industrial point from respect to China. China actually has quite a bit of electrical grid potential available. And so they don't frankly build as many combustion engine cars. So their electrification is very nuanced around their government policy and their energy policy to have many, many power plants that, generate the electricity versus trying to be part of the petro economy as many of the rest of the world will be, frankly, for a very, very long time. So I think there's that, and I think that you're also seeing some, not just in China, but you're seeing some of the Asia Pacific companies, VinFast is one, take advantage of some of the IRA funding and some of the infrastructure bill opportunities available to help offset some of their expansion in the world's largest market right here in the U.S. and North America. So again, very interesting to watch. You're right, keep an eye on China, but also see how they play into this market. Two very different markets, two very different energy frameworks, and two very different industrial policies.
So Bill, sticking with or looking at the United States here, what do you think are some of the big catalysts next year that could drive some EV growth? For instance, is it the point of sale EV tax credit happening at the dealer level? Is it more maybe finally more cheaper EVs coming? What do you think is going to sort of drive more sales potentially next year?
Yeah, well, I think you hit on a few of them right there, and so let's double click on those, right? So obviously there's range anxiety, so getting above that 500 mile per charge. So I think there's some really good innovations that are coming out that we've seen developing, not only just with respect to battery technology from precious heavy metals, but also from synthetics, silicone, for an example, other designs. I think you're going to see pushing into that mid-range. We mentioned earlier in our conversation here that most of the EVs have been in the kind of the luxury category, and so now as we start to push in, keep an eye on GM's Equinox, right? I can. Depending on what kind of luxury I want, I can, push into that for under 40K. Now you're making that available. Also keep an eye on interest rates. Interest rates for car and homes seem to be taking a bit of a pleasant drop in the last, 3-4 weeks. So obviously the Fed has an influence on that. And again, just, keep in touch, around the availability for charging, and as I like to tell, my kids who are grown adults, if you really want to make a difference now, you can still look at a plug-in electric hybrid. I know it's not cool as, maybe some of the other models that are out there. Sorry, I'm just kind of, more mature in the market here, but they are California 2035 compliant as well as many parts of other countries. So maybe there's some additional options that just people haven't thought of because we've been so caught up on the hype curve, right?
Bill Newman and Yahoo Finance's Pras Subramanian, thank you guys both for joining us today.